Gatekeeping is somewhat of an interesting phenomenon. It seems that whether it be an entertainment medium, hobby, or fandom of any sort, someone has tried to gatekeep it at some point. I have experienced gatekeeping, I have friends that have, I see it all over the place whenever I go online. Pretty much, if you're involved in any sort of fandom, either you've experienced gatekeeping, someone you know has, or you've seen it happen to someone else. I've been fortunate in that I haven't experienced gatekeeping in geek culture during an in-person, real-life interaction personally. And keep in mind, these examples I'm going to share are only small pieces of a much larger puzzle that is gatekeeping in geek culture. In my experience, this phenomenon seems to exist by and large online. And if you think about it, it kind of makes sense that it would happen that way. Take the internet, a platform that can bring together millions of people from all walks of life, and give them connectivity and communication with others over entertainment, hobbies, and fandoms, and then add in the anonymity that the internet provides. People can say anything and act just about any way they want. And include that when it comes to fandoms of any kind, people associated with that fandom can end up taking it a little too seriously, or get defensive when someone else's viewpoints on a fandom don't align with their own, or they feel a fandom is being invaded by outsiders. So what exactly is gatekeeping? When I say gatekeeping, what am I talking about? It has an official definition, which is the activity of controlling and usually limiting general access to something. Which, if you think about it, that's what gatekeeping is, right? People within a fandom trying to restrict others' access to it in some way or another. But if you want a more overarching colloquial definition, gatekeeping is the efforts of people entrenched in a fandom to keep new potential fans or participants out. In turn, only allowing pre-approved select individuals that the gatekeepers deem as true fans in. You'll see that word true surface a lot. That phrase true fan being thrown around quite a bit. You have to be a true fan to be allowed into and to participate in a fandom, which is part of why gatekeeping is so ridiculous. Who decides with objective precision what constitutes a true fan of something? Ask 10 people involved in a fandom what a true fan is, and you'll likely get 10 different answers. Or you'll just get told they don't care, and they'll tell you to just enjoy the fandom and let others do the same. And I think that's where most rational people involved in fandoms are coming from, kind of a live and let live, this is for anyone interested kind of mentality. But there's no denying that there will always be that sect of people that can turn a fandom completely toxic. So think about what constitutes geek culture. What fandoms come together to form geek culture? We got film, television, there's anime, manga, literature, comics, tabletop and video gaming, music, cosplay, the list goes on. I've been involved in what can be considered geek culture pretty much since I was 8 years old. I watched Pokemon, I collected the cards. When I could, I watched my friends play the games, because I wasn't allowed to own a handheld or a console, at least until later on. When I went to my friends' houses, I played Nintendo 64 with them. A little later on, I got big into Star Wars. That started when my uncle brought over the Phantom Menace VHS and my whole family watched it. I went on to watch and rewatch the original trilogy several times over. I was also very much into Dragon Ball Z and watched several sagas of that. I even did my best to cosplay Goku, as much as an 11-year-old can do. When I was 10, I got my first Game Boy with Pokemon Yellow, and at 12, I got my first game console. That same year, I discovered the Yu-Gi-Oh! Trading card game and anime, and played hundreds of hours of card duels with my friends throughout the years. So yeah, I've been involved in geek culture for the vast majority of my life now, and I've always enjoyed those hobbies and those fandoms I've been a part of over the years. And never once did someone in person try to gatekeep those things or turn me as a new fan away from them. Online, however, is an entirely different story. Go online to any forum, fan site, or comment section, and you'll see the endless examples of people gatekeeping fandoms. A prime example I've seen is with Pokemon, and this will happen a few different ways. On one side, you have the people like me who grew up watching the Indigo League and playing the Game Boy games, but for some reason, when this preference for the first generation is voiced, gatekeepers will say that you're not a true fan of Pokemon if this is the case. You have to like every generation, or at the very least, can't have the first generation as your favorite, because that's just too predictable. They'll say, take your Gen 1ing somewhere else. And if your favorite Pokemon is Pikachu, forget it. Not a true fan. Of course, I'm not going to pretend like this hasn't happened in reverse too, right? You get people like me who likely have the nostalgia knobs turned up high who cherish that first generation, and then will gatekeep those who don't agree that the first generation is the best. Which is ridiculous, right? Because think about it, Pokemon is a franchise that's been around for over 20 years now. It's transcended generational boundaries at this point. People in their 30s who grew up with Pokemon are fans, but it's also your 8-year-old elementary school kids. Hell, some parents of those 30-year-olds are Pokemon fans. Personally, I don't care if you grew up watching the Indigo League or didn't, whether your first Pokemon experience was with the first generation or the 8th. We're all Pokemon fans, and that's what matters to me. I've also seen gatekeeping with the Pokemon games specifically. In Sword and Shield on the Switch, attacks available for use are displayed like any other game, but next to it, the attack type and what kind of effect it will have damage-wise is also displayed. In the early titles on the Game Boy, this wasn't the case, and people are taking offense over the fact that these new games are pandering to new players, supposedly, by displaying things like that damage indicator, saying the games aren't hardcore enough anymore. I guess the reason for the offense over this is because back in those early titles, you really had to know typing. You had to know your attacks and what to use against your opponent. There was no assist in that regard, and yeah, you can say it's less hardcore now, but is that really bad? What if a new player decides to go back and try those older games after they beat Sword and Shield and experience them like we did? I doubt their Pokemon journey will end with Sword and Shield. It's a franchise that brings people of all ages and walks of life together. It's an interest we can all share. So why gatekeep it and try to keep newer fans out? I've also seen people gatekeep anime from others. I mentioned I grew up watching Pokemon, Dragon Ball Z, I also watched Digimon a fair amount. I always caught Full Metal Alchemist and Inuyasha when those were on back in the day. For some, this is all the anime they need, right? But others choose to dive much deeper. They watch every episode, they make the effort to watch and experience all those niche titles that aren't as popular. Anime, and to an extent Japanese culture, becomes their favorite hobby, and they live by anime. And there's nothing wrong with that. If anime brings you joy in your life, have at it, right? But the problem arises when those select few who are super hardcore about anime take it upon themselves to gatekeep anime from others. Unless you're watching only niche, deep-cut anime titles, you're not a true fan, right? You like Naruto as the primary anime you watch? Not a true fan. Watch any or all of the Forbidden Four? Not a true fan. I've seen this online countless times, and it sounds ridiculous because at the end of the day, regardless of the anime titles you choose to watch, you're still watching anime. You're still part of the fandom. Hardcore or not, you can still experience anime. There's also the never-ending subbed versus dubbed debate that fills comment sections and forums. God forbid you enjoy watching anime dubbed. For the gatekeepers, this is a no-no, right? If you watch anything but the uncut Japanese subtitled version, you're not a real anime fan. I mean, who honestly cares that much about how others are experiencing anime, right? It doesn't affect you or your existence if someone chooses to watch dubbed anime. I've seen purists gatekeep retro gaming from others. They seem to believe that unless you're playing on original unmodified hardware through a CRT TV, you're not getting the real experience. I mean, that's a matter of opinion, really. It all comes down to personal preference. If you prefer to play physical copy on original hardware and a CRT TV, go ahead, right? I can understand that. It's how gaming was experienced for many years by many different players. And if you're nostalgic and trying to relive those golden years playing games on original hardware and a CRT, that's cool. I prefer to experience retro games through that setup too. But it's not like there's a need to belittle or exclude people who don't prefer that format from the retro game community. I've also seen gatekeeping among the cosplay community, cosplay being crafting or wearing costumes that represent characters within fandoms. There's a portion of this community that believes that unless you're crafting all your own costumes from scratch with the highest quality realism possible, then you're not a real cosplayer. Which is ridiculous, right? I mean, a person who purchases or commissions their costumes are just as real of cosplayers as those who craft their own. If a costume is commissioned, then an artist is being paid for their time and resources, so how exactly is that a bad thing for the community? Another aspect of this phenomenon I've never understood is when men within a fandom actively try to gatekeep fandoms from women who want to get involved or participate. Like if a woman starts talking about a facet of geek culture, men from that fandom will instantly assume they don't know what they're talking about, or even worse, start quizzing them on everything about the fandom, and if they get anything wrong or don't know something, oh, not a true fan. For some reason, this is really prevalent within the Dungeons & Dragons community. Some of these men who play honestly believe for some reason that women shouldn't be allowed to play D&D, or certain men will assume that if a woman plays, she must be new, and start acting all high and mighty about how long they themselves have been playing. And it doesn't make any sense, because I can't tell you how many men involved in geek culture have expressed how much they wish more women would take interest and get involved, while at the same time, men are the ones actively trying to gatekeep these fandoms and culture from women. And at that point, if they take interest and are met with misogyny and gatekeeping, there's a good chance any interest at all they had in getting immersed in the culture and the fandoms will dissolve entirely. Why would they want to be a part of a community or culture if they're going to be met with that type of behavior? This next one isn't exclusive to geek culture, but I know people and have seen plenty of examples of participants in geek culture who like and listen to metal music. And if you've spent any amount of time online as a metal fan, you know metal is something that people gatekeep constantly. If you like and listen to any core bands, some metalcore or deathcore, and call it metal, nope, lies. If you listen to it, you're a poser. Core isn't real metal. If you call yourself a metalhead, stop listening to core and start listening to some real metal, right? I've seen this happen so many times I can't even count the instances, and I've never understood why. Core sounds like metal, it's produced like metal, so why do the elitists and gatekeepers claim it isn't metal? For instance, I really like the band Bring Me the Horizon, so I get to experience gatekeeping on what seems like a daily basis from like 3 different sides, right? You have those that say, that's not metal, or that's not real metal. Then you have infighting within the fan base itself over what albums you should and shouldn't be listening to. Like anything past That's the Spirit, you're a blind supporter. Listen to more than the old stuff and you're not a true fan. Listen to just the old stuff and you're also not a true fan. The debate will never end. There's never going to be a universal consensus reached on the validity of core or subgenres of metal, right? It's not going to happen. So why spend all this time and energy debating amongst ourselves as metal fans over whether or not core is metal and just listen to and experience the music? Especially since metal fans are seen as creepy and weird and are alienated by so many other subcultures already. Geek culture has come a long way since the 80s and 90s in terms of mainstream integration and overall cultural acceptance. In the age of battle royale games and the MCU, it's a lot cooler now in 2020 to be immersed in geek culture than it was in the 80s, for instance. But let's be realistic here. Geek culture, metal music, regardless of the progress made over the years, still have more than a glimmer of stigmatization around them. Like with metal, many still consider it weird, nerdy, and outright unacceptable to be involved with and to enjoy aspects of geek culture. The blanket stereotype of that mid-30s virgin sitting at his computer in his mom's basement with Cheeto dust everywhere, that stereotype, that stigmatization around geek culture is still alive and well in 2020. And although we've gained traction with getting geek culture more culturally accepted, there's still a long way to go. And the only way to eradicate that stigma around geek culture is to get more and more people involved in it. The more numbers we have in our ranks, the more accepted geek culture will become in society. And it will only improve as time goes on and more people become immersed in it. So because of that, it seems so counterintuitive to gatekeep fandoms and aspects of geek culture. Gatekeeping is meant to keep new fans out and the true fans in. But at what cost? I've never understood why certain people feel they have to, be the Black Knight from Monty Python and the Holy Grail.
So be it. Come, Patsy.
None shall pass.
What?
None shall pass.
I have no quarrel with you, good Sir Knight, but I must cross this bridge.
Then you shall die.
And try their damnedest to keep new and interested potential fans and community members out. Why, when geek culture already has such a stigma to it, do gatekeepers still want these fandoms and this culture to remain these exclusive, tight-knit, elitist communities that only allow select pre-approved individuals deemed properly as true fans in? It baffles my mind, and I'll never understand it. And when it comes to gatekeeping fandoms and geek culture from women who want into these communities, I'm just as baffled, considering so many men involved in these fandoms and culture claim to want more women involved so badly, yet certain ones will seemingly bend over backwards making sure they aren't included. That's it for today. If you like this video, if you've seen or experienced gatekeeping yourself, if you have thoughts on this phenomenon, leave a comment below with your experiences and thoughts. I'd be happy to read them. This is Toast, and I'm out.